Excellent. So good morning again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Dr. Sarah Glenn Smith and currently serving as the chair of the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. On behalf of all of the MCSW, we'd like to acknowledge that although this meeting is being held virtually, the MCSW is located in Boston, Massachusetts, the traditional land of the Namkag and Pawtucket people. We have provided a link in the chat, or if we haven't, we will, to learn more about the tribal land that you're joining us from. So we both pay our respects and show our gratitude. It is so great to be with you all. This report has been a long time coming, and I am so excited to see such a wide array of local residents, organizations, stakeholders, and elected officials who were able to come and attend our report briefing. We're grateful to be able to share more about our research and experiences with so many folks dedicated to advocacy right here in Massachusetts. Today's agenda is a robust, data-filled report. Please notify any members of the MCSW, again, if you have any concerns, or contact us via the chat, and we'll make every effort to make sure that you feel safe and that your privacy is protected and heard throughout this event. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence or the threat of domestic violence, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline for help, 1-800-799-SAFE, which is 7233, or go to the hotline, which is www.thehotline.org for anonymous, confidential online chats available in both English and Spanish. If you need additional assistance, you can reach out to any of our staff at any time. I am honored to be here, and humbled and honored to be here with the speakers that I have here today, and as we go through them, I'll let each of them introduce themselves. The MCSW makes every effort to accommodate the needs of our participants. If you require additional support, please message anyone with the MCSW behind their name for assistance. Our speakers today share a plethora of experience and expertise and come from all across the state. If you have any questions for them specifically in the chat as the presentation progresses, we do have a section for Q&A at the end of the report or debrief. The MCSW was created by legislation in 1998 as an independent state agency seeking to advance equality for women across the state and promote their rights and opportunities. The commission consists of 19 volunteer commissioners who are appointed by the governor, the Senate president, Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the Caucus of Women's Legislators. The commission represents and recognizes all women, regardless of their age, race, color, creed, abilities, language, socioeconomic status, immigration status, sexual orientation, or gender assigned at birth. Together, our purpose is to provide a permanent, effective voice for women throughout Massachusetts, but we can't do this without all of you. Here at the MCSW, we know that advocacy on behalf of all women and girls of the Commonwealth is only as good as data and stories we hear from those closest to the issues impacting our lives. This is all the more true when we hope to hear from women and girls holding additional marginalized identities. Our commissioners hail from all across the state, and our 11 regional bodies are the boots on the ground that listen to the concerns of all women, children, and families across Massachusetts. We firmly believe that when we work together, we can tackle any issue. The commission stands for full, fundamental freedoms, basic human rights, and the full enjoyment of life for all women throughout their lives. Our mission is to provide a permanent, effective voice for women across Massachusetts. And now I'm going to turn it over to my sister, friend, and colleague, Commissioner Rebecca Bacht, to share more about the history behind this report and what we learned from our survey. Rebecca.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you. I have been serving on the commission for about 6 years now, and I'm the immediate past program and planning chair, which is our committee that oversees our reports. So it's really an honor to be here today to share the LGBTQ report with you, because as Sarah said before, the MCSW was created to advance women and girls toward full equity in all areas of life. But we recognize that in order to achieve this mission, the commission recognizes that the forces that prevent full equity, such as sexism and discrimination, go hand in hand with other forces of oppression, such as homophobia and transphobia. In May 2021, the Boston community was rocked by the loss of activist and organizer Jahaira De Alto, a transgender woman who dedicated her life to the liberation of transgender people and all survivors of domestic and sexual violence. As the commission mourned Ms. De Alto and celebrated her life's work, the commission again recommitted to its work to uplift the transgender and LGBTQ community. We released a statement of solidarity after this tragedy in which we committed to stepping up our partnership with and outreach to the trans community and trans serving organizations, and committed the commission to better serving trans women and girls and to work in solidarity with the larger transgender community. In the 2 years since Ms. De Alto's tragic passing, the legal, social, and political climate for LGBTQ people, especially transgender people, has become highly charged. Legislation across the country aimed at preventing transgender people's access to healthcare, public accommodations, and sports has proliferated, along with Don't Say Gay laws and book bans targeting LGBTQ stories and expression. Over the past 2 years, hundreds of laws have been proposed and dozens passed, limiting the rights of LGBTQ plus people in their access to healthcare, public accommodations, sports competitions, self-expression, and reading and educational materials. Under these increasingly alarming conditions, it is especially important for the MCSW to live up to its commitment to uplift the voices of women and girls within the LGBTQ community and to report on their status and to make policy recommendations to advance this status. To that end, the Commission committed more than a year of diligent research and collaboration to conduct primary data collection in order to write this report, the 2023 report on the status of LGBTQ plus individuals and families in Massachusetts and related policy implications. But we know that only by standing together and raising our voices can we identify the issues impacting the health and wellness of our most vulnerable communities and ensure that we have the information and tools necessary to make effective and long-lasting policy changes. The MCSW and state and regional commissioners and staff have worked alongside community organizations to host a series of listening sessions called Community Conversations, received responses on the Concerns and Experience survey from respondents across the Commonwealth, and worked alongside our report author, Katie Chikoyan, I apologize if I missaid that, Katie, PhD candidate, and Shalea West, MCSW's Program and Research Director, to compile this crucial report. The data is stark. LGBTQ plus individuals are currently experiencing alarming rates of both interpersonal and structural violence in the US. Recently, in June of 2023, the Supreme Court ruled in the 303 Creative case that based on religious expression reasons, LGBTQ people could be denied equal protection and access guarantees in commercial and service settings. Beyond the erosion of legal protections and institution of legal discrimination, LGBTQ plus individuals experience violence at alarming rates. They are 4 times more likely to experience violent victimization than their non-LGBTQ plus peers. But it is not enough to reduce an entire population to mere statistics. We must take what we've learned and act. Together, we can chart a path forward, including through advocacy for needed legislative and policy reforms to ensure that Massachusetts remains a safe haven for the LGBTQ plus community and all of us to live our lives as we see fit and to ensure basic human rights and the full enjoyment of life for all women and girls throughout their lives. And I will now turn it over to MCSW's wonderful and hardworking Program and Research Director, Shalea West, to discuss the process and structures of this report.
Good morning, it's great to be with you all. In early 2023, the MCSW launched an investigation into the needs, concerns, and experiences of LGBTQ plus people in Massachusetts. Our goals were simple. We wanted to hear from Mass residents on the experience of LGBTQ plus women, individuals, and families, better understand the needs of Mass LGBTQ individuals and families, make policy recommendations to advance the rights, equity, and overall well-being of LGBTQ plus women, individuals, and families in the Commonwealth. This report pulls together data from multiple sources. Survey data of Massachusetts LGBTQ plus individuals and women's concerns and experiences, community conversations, existing literature, coalitions supporting the concerns of LGBTQ plus women, and the strengths and limitations of data. The MCSW launched an online survey of LGBTQ+ individuals and women within the Commonwealth from April 1st through June 1st, 2023. Participants resided in 12 of the 14 counties in Massachusetts. All respondents fell between the ages of 18 to 64, with 72% of respondents between the ages of 25 to 44. 3/4 of respondents identified as white, 15% as Black/African-American, 10% as Hispanic or Latinx, 4% as Asian/Asian American, and 4% as American Indian/Alaskan Native. 84% of respondents completed a college education. 88% of respondents were employed full-time at the time they completed the survey, and half, exactly 50%, belong to households earning above the Massachusetts median income for a two-family household, which is $96,358, reported in 2022. 69% of survey respondents identified as LGBTQ+, with an additional 6% not choosing to respond to the question. I'd like to now turn it over to Commissioner Arena to discuss the other data elements included in our report.
Thank you, Shalaya, and thank you to the folks that are joining us today. An important source of information gathering was our community conversations with the Massachusetts LGBTQ+ women and families. In the spring of 2023, the MCSW hosted 2 community conversations with LGBTQ+ women, families, and those who support them. One remote in partnership with GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders, GLAD, located in Boston, and one in person in Hampshire County. This one was which participants resided in 2 of the most rural counties in the state. Hampshire County is the 4th most rural, and Franklin County is the most rural. The format of the community conversation is different from that of public hearings or other more traditional research focus groups. These conversations are facilitated by commissioners from either the state commission or the regional commissions. Open-ended questions were asked to elicit stories and experiences of being an LGBTQ+ woman or family in the Commonwealth. The responses built off one another, with many participants responding to one another, not solely to questions posed by the facilitator. The community conversations not only gleaned a wealth of data, but also acted as community building and consciousness raising tools. Participants reflected on the emotional experiences of coming together in their own geographic regions with others who are navigating similar challenges and expressed gratitude for the opportunity. Additionally, existing literature and coalitions supporting the concerns of LGBTQ+ women were a vital source of data collection for this report. Inclusion of work done by other commissions and coalitions working to support various populations in the Commonwealth and across the country. Specifically, the Massachusetts Commission on Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and Questioning Youth, the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Aging Commission, the National Center for Transgender Equality, the Human Rights Campaign, the Family Equality Council, the Network La Red, the New York City Anti-Violence Project. You will now hear from my sister Commissioner DeCarvalho.
Thank you, Commissioner Arena. We would be remiss, though, if we didn't acknowledge the strengths and the limitations of the data. The goal of this report was to hear directly from LGBTQ+ women in the Commonwealth about the issues most affecting them. The greatest strength of this data in this report is the extent to which it does amplify the voices of the LGBTQ+ community. The implementation of grassroots data collection and recruitment methods enabled this report to capture voices of anonymous survey respondents, experiences of individuals living in some of the most rural counties in the Commonwealth, and the perspectives of those who would not have been able to attend events in person. The data captured in the report, however, does not reflect the perspectives of all LGBTQ+ people and families in the Commonwealth. Survey respondents are not demographically representative of the full Massachusetts LGBTQ+ community, and the survey sample was skewed with more white, highly educated, and financially well-off respondents. Survey and community conversations asked about the intimate experiences and concerns of people who have frequently experienced discrimination and are currently watching their protections and rights as full members of society be stripped away by state and federal actors. Fear and distrust of a government-related organization such as the MCSW is not only prevalent, but also often justified. This further exacerbated for individuals with intersectional identities that are also experiencing similar discrimination and a lack of protections based on those other identities. So it's reasonable to assume that the experiences of multiply marginalized individuals such as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ plus people are very different from those of non-BIPOC LGBTQ plus people. To address this, the report highlights the stories from community conversations, especially of participants who identified themselves as people of color, people who have struggled financially at some point in their lives, and people whose multiple identities intersect in ways that have historically and currently are being targeted with the increased barriers to accessing support and equity. Continued research is needed to further understand the experiences and concerns of all Massachusetts LGBTQ plus individuals and to keep up with the emerging and ever-changing concerns that impact this population. And I'll turn it back over to MCSW Program and Research Director Shalea West to unpack a little bit more of what we learned from this research.
Thank you, Gamel. The 4 categories of our findings across all data sources included interpersonal structural violence against LGBTQ plus individuals. LGBTQ plus individuals experience both physical violence like sexual and physical assault or murder, and structural violence, including policies that attack their rights, the inability to earn and save money, the threat of losing rights to their children, and general feelings of being unwanted/unwelcome at disproportionate rates. Economic stability was our next category, and that includes pay inequity/wage gaps, the impact of workplace harassment on the ability of LGBTQ people to maintain steady jobs, advance their careers, and build/maintain wealth. Parenting and child rearing, that includes challenges that can arise from parenting children who identify as LGBTQ+, and being a parent who does as well. And navigating intersectional identities. Like all people, LGBTQ+ individuals exist at intersections of many identities. And these findings within our report say that LGBTQ+ people experience their sexual orientations and gender identities at the same time as their racial and religious and other identities as well. So I'm now going to turn it over to our amazing research consultant, Katie Chikoyan, who will go into more detail on each category of what we found.
Thank you, Shalea, and good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to break down a little bit more of each of the categories that Shalea just mentioned. When we think about what we learned around interpersonal and structural violence against LGBTQ individuals, we learned first from the existing literature that LGBTQ+ individuals experience violence at alarming rates. LGBT people are nearly 4 times as likely to experience violent victimization than non-LGBT people. Specifically, LGBTQ+ people are at a higher risk for experiencing domestic and intimate partner violence and sexual violence. There's a higher lifetime prevalence of experiences of intimate partner violence against sexual minority women than heterosexual women, and violence with bisexual women being roughly twice as likely to experience this type of violence. Similar rates also exist for folks who identify as transgender. While we often think of Massachusetts as a safe place for LGBTQ+ folks, the Commission found that these national trends are in line with what LGBTQ+ individuals in the Commonwealth are experiencing. Respondents to our concerns and experiences survey, and specifically LGBTQ+ respondents, had experienced discrimination based on their identities, and 89% had experienced microaggressions. In the community conversations, we heard about experiences of sexual assault, about the lack of conversation and nuances around specifically queer sexual assaults, and the lack of skills and training within mainstream domestic and sexual violence providers to understand and support LGBTQ+ survivors. When we look at our second category of findings around economic stability, we see, again, from the existing literature, in 2023, white LGBTQ+ workers earned 97 cents on the dollar of the average American worker. And then at the same time, white Latinx LGBTQ+ workers earned 90 cents, and Black LGBTQX workers earned 80 cents. Excuse me, I misspoke there. Not white Latinx, just Latinx. Similarly, LGBTQ plus men, regardless of race, earned 96 cents on the dollar. LGBTQ plus women earned 87 cents. Non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, and two-spirit workers earned 70 cents. Trans men earned 70 cents, and trans women earned 60 cents. So we see pay gaps across each of the LGBTQ plus categories. There's also wealth gaps. So wealth is a broader measure than income and is a summation of the total assets an individual or family has minus their debt. There's plenty of existing research that shows that wealth gaps based on race and gender are substantially wider than income gaps. We see something similar when we look at the wealth gap for LGBTQ plus individuals. LGBTQ plus respondents to not our survey, but another survey had far lower annual incomes than other adults, and over half of LGBTQI plus people have less than $5,000 in savings. A number of factors contribute to this, including losing the ability to rely financially on families after coming out, facing economic discrimination, paying out-of-pocket expenses for family formation, for legal name and gender marker changes, and for gender-affirming healthcare. A second category that contributes to economic instability is workplace harassment. 60% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual employees have been fired from or denied a job, and that's in comparison to 40% of the general population. At least 1 in 5 LGBTQ plus person reports sexuality or gender identity discrimination when applying for jobs, being paid equally, or being considered for promotions. All of that's based on literature that exists previous to our work. What we found in the Concerns and Experience survey was that 76% of respondents do feel safe in their workplace or school. However, even within that 76%, many still feel that aspects of their identities are unsupported in these spaces. Respondents have been passed over for opportunities and leadership roles. They've had to muscle their way onto projects. They've experienced sexual harassment at conferences and networking events. They've been tokenized and been disappointed by supposedly inclusive jobs that made them feel unwelcome because of their sexual identities. We also heard similar stories at the community conversations. I'm going to share just a brief sample from one conversation. And I will say, just for both of the examples I'm sharing, names have been changed to protect the privacy of participants. So Alex, who joined us at one of our community conversations and uses they, them pronouns, decided to be out as a non-binary at their new job because the company had a reputation of being inclusive and accepting. Recently, someone had come to meet with them. The visitor signed in at the front desk and asked, "I'm meeting with Alex today. Is Alex a them?" Laughing. Alex's coworker who was sitting at the desk with them, or sitting at the front desk, laughed along with them. Not long after that, the same coworker was asking employees their pronouns to put on an employee board. And whenever someone said that they used he or she, the coworker would respond by saying, "I love it when it's easy." Alex is the only person in their workplace that uses they, them pronouns, and reflected on how hard it is to have the self-esteem to even try to fight these kinds of discrimination. Moving into our third category of findings around parenting and child rearing, there are two aspects of this category. First is parenting children who identify as LGBTQ+, and the second is being a parent while identifying as LGBTQ+. So in the existing literature, we've found that a sense of belonging is critically important to LGBTQ youth at school. The extent to which students feel accepted and included in their school environment is associated with many positive outcomes in adolescence, including lower rates of risky behaviors such as smoking and drinking, depression, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempts. Even when school environments do not fully support LGBTQ youth, their supportive parents can make all of the difference. Supportive parents are most strongly associated with lower rates of depression and rates of higher self-esteem. Again, at community conversations, we heard stories about this. So we heard that supportive school environments can foster belonging, but our parents at community conversations also shared the ways that unsupportive school environments can do just the opposite. This is a story from Aaron and Mike. Again, names have been changed. They're the parents of a transgender son, and their son came home from his middle school one day and shared the story of a group of boys who were harassing him. They would pound on the stall door when he was in the bathroom. Later in the year, he found a single stall restroom that he could use without their harassment, but it was in a different area of the school. than where his classes took place. On his way back to class one day, a teacher stopped him and questioned why he was there. She asked for his name, and when he provided his chosen name, she scolded and said, "No, tell me the name your mama gave you." Erin, his mom, recalled with the pain of watching her child, who had once loved school, become a student with sinking grades because of his teacher misgendering him and making him feel that he couldn't be himself in the classroom. Looking at the experiences of being an LGBTQ plus parent, we know that in the US, 170,000 children are currently being raised by same-sex couples, and LGBTQ plus millennials are actively planning to grow their families at comparable rates to their non-LGBTQ plus peers. They're doing so through foster care, adoption, and assistive reproductive technology. Some of the things we heard, again, in a community conversation really surrounded this idea of second parent adoption. So when parents, typically identifying as LGBTQ plus individuals, are parenting the parent who was non-biologically related or did not birth the child, goes through an adoption process. We heard that judges and clerks are undereducated on this issue, and that the experiences of families talking to these judges and clerks vary significantly based on the individual judge. The legal adoption process can be humiliating, lengthy, and expensive, and is only accessible to those with the privilege and resources to undergo it. There's particular risk for non-legal parents who don't go through this process after separation or divorce, or in cases of domestic abuse. One mother and de facto parent spent 4 years in litigation after the birth mother of her daughter took the child out of state. Another particular risk is related to the intersectional identities of these families. And we saw that LGBTQ plus parents of color face more barriers in gaining needed legal protections, and they are less likely to be able to afford to engage in these legal processes. And if they do, they're less likely to look like a couple that the court wants, so they face more barriers. Finally, and going right attached to that, LGBTQ plus folks have to navigate their intersectional identities. People of color are more likely than white people to identify as LGBT. 4% of white adults, just under 5% of Asian adults, 5% of Black adults, and 6% of Latinx adults also identify as members of the LGBTQ plus community. An intersectional lens requires considering not only the multiple identities that an individual holds, but also the ways that these identities overlap and intersect, and the power or lack thereof that accompanies those intersections. For example, in 2015, transgender people were more than twice as likely than the general US population to be living in poverty. But if you look specifically at trans people of color, they were more than 3 times as likely. 24% of LGBTQ plus people of color experienced discriminatory treatment from a healthcare provider in the previous year, compared to only 17% of their white counterparts. And 44% of LGBTQ plus people of color had experienced discrimination when trying to rent or purchase a home, compared to only 32% of white LGBTQ plus individuals. Again, we heard similar things from the Commonwealth itself. 71% of LGBTQ plus survey respondents noted the ways that their LGBTQ identity impacted their other identities. For instance, respondents shared the ways that their LGBTQ plus communities did not accept their Christian identity, and the way that their faith communities discriminated or otherwise made them feel badly about their sexual orientations and gender identities. In community conversations, we heard about struggles to find spaces where folks can bring their full selves to the table, particularly the combination of their racial, sexual orientation, and gender identities. Some communities that do welcome queer and trans folks, but don't fully embrace Blackness, for instance, came up. And this lack of acceptance made the residents question whether they want to stay in their community or even in Massachusetts in the long term. All of this data can feel really bleak without also presenting solutions to the most pressing problems that face our most vulnerable communities. I am honored to turn it back over to Commissioner DiCarvalho, who also serves as the Vice Chair of the MCSW Legislative and Public Policy Committee, to review legislation that could make that difference.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. We have several policies and pending legislation that we are looking into, we are endorsing, and that are some priorities for us, and we'd like to share that with you. First and foremost, we want to make sure that we're talking about things that are addressing the interpersonal structural violence against LGBTQ plus individuals, banning the use of the LGBTQ plus panic defense in Massachusetts, and then acts to promote diversity on public boards, to shore up non-discrimination laws, and also making sure that we're creating things that are going to bring inclusivity for the LGBTQ plus community, like the Act relative to gender identity on Massachusetts identification and the Act relative to gender affirming hair removal treatment. We also want to then look forward into policies that are going to help the economic stability of the community. And so acts regarding salary range transparency, affordable, accessible, high quality early education for child development and well-being, and acts to support survivors of trafficking and abuse, encouraging increased access to opportunities through expungement and or sealing of records will all help to provide some economic stability to the LGBTQ plus community. Further, regarding parenting and child rearing, the Healthy Youth Act is a really important aspect of creating that inclusive environment for our young LGBTQ plus community. Also, an act to increase access to disposable menstrual products, an act to include relative to an LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum, parental rights and education. Legal parentage equality is something that's going to be really helpful to address the issues related to de facto parents and second parent adoptions and all of the like, and an act relative to birthing justice in the Commonwealth would all help support not only LGBTQ plus children, but LGBTQ plus parents. And then in regards to navigating intersectional identities, we are endorsing legislation on establishing a Medicare for all in Massachusetts, an act relative to rehabilitation, reentry, and human rights for incarcerated persons, and establishing a jail and prison construction moratorium, protecting the civil rights and safety of all Massachusetts residents, and an act relative to language access and inclusion. There are so many incredible pieces of legislation out there that we endorse, prioritize, and support. And if you're aware of a piece of legislation we should add to our 2023 legislative priorities, you can email us at mcsw@mass.gov. There's also additional information on our 2023-2024 legislative priorities found at our website at masscsw.org, masscsw.org. And then now I'll turn it back over to our MCSW Program and Research Director, Shalea West, as well as the report author, Katie, to answer any questions that we might have in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you all for commissioners and Katie this morning. We're happy to answer any questions that you all may have. In the chat.
I'll just highlight, it looks like Ellen has been able to respond to a few things in terms of where to find the slides, where to find the report, where to find more information on the policy implications. Please do note to fill out the survey at the end if you want a printed copy of the report.
Yes, thank you so much, Katie, for that. And with that, that does conclude our report brief. I'm going to turn it over to, go right ahead.
I do see a question that just came in around the Department of Elementary Secondary Education's health education guidelines for the Healthy Youth Act. Mm-hmm. I'll say one of the policy implications we have is to pass the Healthy Youth Act. And so, which is right in line with the new guidelines. That would be my thought there. It's important to also pass the legislation to enshrine this in law, make sure that it is not something that can change in the future. I don't know, Shalea, if you wanted to say anything there.
Nope, you touched right on it, Katie. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Of course, no problem. Well, if there's no more questions right now, you can always email us at mcsw@mass.gov, and we'll be sure to throw that email in the chat as well. And I will turn it over to Ellen. Would you like to close us out?
I would love to. Thank you very much. It's great to be with you all. I can't thank you enough for this report debrief. I've learned an incredible amount today. And of course, my special gratitude to the state and regional commissioners who are with us, who've joined us really from all across the Commonwealth. And a special thank you to our MCSW team, our executive director and fearless leader, Shaitia Spruell, Shalea, Tina, Katie, Lauren, Julia, for all of your hard work on both the report, this project, and this briefing. But of course, we invite you to share your feedback and any questions you may have with us via the email, which I'll drop into the chat in a minute. And please take our survey. And of course, this report is environmentally friendly. And if you'd want a physically printed copy of it, please fill out the survey and one will be mailed to you. And if you'd like a digital version of the copy, it can be downloaded from our website. And I've just dropped the link into the chat for that survey. So should you have any additional questions or want additional information, just reach out to us via any platform. We're eager to help you. And finally, we know that we gather to raise our voices, to be represented, and to advocate for our communities. And while the issues we face are multiple, together we can tackle anything. And more importantly, we're here today because we believe in the power of women to not only overcome these barriers, but to bring them down altogether. So stay plugged into the MCSW, join our monthly newsletter, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn, and be sure to save the date for any of our upcoming events. We've got a public hearing in Dartmouth on Tuesday, November 14th, and we've got a virtual housing hearing on Thursday, January 25th, 2024, even though it is crazy to say that number. Thank you all so much for being with us today and spending a piece of your day learning a little bit more about the LGBTQ+ Commonwealth community right here in Massachusetts. Thank you. Have a great day.